I stood near the buffet table when Craig's voice filled Janet's basement. "You're a pathetic loser who married up for money." 23 family members went silent. Lisa rose from the sectional sofa, face flushed. "Ben, apologize to Craig right now, in front of everyone, or I want a divorce." 3 seconds of silence. "I accept." Her face drained of color. "The divorce, I mean." Free way to support this channel? Tap subscribe. Thank you. I stood near the buffet table when Craig's voice filled Janet's basement. "You're a pathetic loser who married up for money." 23 family members went silent. Lisa rose from the sectional sofa, face flushed. "Ben, apologize to Craig right now, in front of everyone, or I want a divorce." 3 seconds of silence. "I accept." Her face drained of color. "The divorce, I mean." I sat in my truck, watching the street lamp flicker on, casting orange light across the quiet street. My father's Timex showed 5:14 p.m. Inside that house, 23 people were probably still processing what just happened. I touched the watch crystal. Frank Archer wore this for 34 years before lung cancer took him. He'd taught me the trade and something more important. I was 16 when he took me to a union meeting. One of the older guys, Patterson, was arguing with the shop steward about a contract dispute. Patterson kept backing down, compromising on every point, trying to keep the peace. By the end, he'd agreed to terms worse than what management had originally offered. Frank pulled me aside afterward. "You see what happened there?" "Yeah," I said. "He gave up everything." Frank nodded. "A man who'll compromise his dignity for peace doesn't get either one." Patterson wanted everyone to like him. Now they don't respect him, and he still doesn't have peace. Remember that. I remembered. 12 years ago, I'd been rewiring the Westman construction office when Lisa brought me coffee. She'd smiled at the way I labeled every wire, called it refreshing to meet someone who cared about details. We married 8 months later. Her uncle Robert offered me a job at the company. "Family gesture," he'd said. I accepted because that's what you do when you marry someone. You make room for their world. I reached behind my seat for the thermos I'd brought this morning. My hand hit canvas instead of metal. A duffel bag, dark green, tucked against the back wall of the cab. I pulled it forward, unzipped it. 3 changes of clothes, neatly folded. The clothes were folded in my style, thirds, not halves. Toiletries in a plastic bag that matched my travel kit from the hall closet. My medications. A sealed envelope. I'd packed this systematically, but when? I opened the envelope. $2,400 bills. The clothes, the toiletries, the cash. All organized with the same methodical precision I used on job sites. My hands had known before my mind admitted it. The bag proved what I'd been denying for weeks. What Lisa never knew was that I'd started my own electrical contracting business in 2003, 9 years before we met. I opened my laptop and pulled up the business folder I kept on an encrypted drive. Client lists, invoices, project schedules. All the records Lisa had never asked to see. Small jobs at first. Residential rewiring. Panel upgrades. Emergency calls on weekends. By the time I met her, I had 47 regular clients. I told her about the weekend work, called them projects. She nodded, said it was nice. I had hobbies outside the family business. I didn't correct her assumption. The business kept growing. I managed it through a separate invoicing system, discreet and professional. Statements went to Tommy Reese's electrical supply shop, not our home address. Deposits went to an account I'd opened in 2003 before Lisa and I ever met. By last year, I had 107 active clients. Maintenance contracts, commercial renovations, new construction electrical systems. The work generated $180,000 annually. Lisa thought I made $47,000 at Westman Construction. That's what I deposited to our joint account. She never asked about the rest. 6 months ago, Craig got evicted from his apartment. Gambling debts, Lisa said. He just needs time to get back on his feet. He moved into our home office, my office, the room where I'd quietly managed 107 clients for years, keeping records Lisa never saw. After Craig took over the office, I moved my client management to the truck, kept a laptop in the locked toolbox, handled calls during lunch breaks, did paperwork at Tommy's shop after hours. Not ideal, but it worked. Craig spread across our house like water finding cracks. His clothes in the bathroom. His dishes in the sink. His betting apps open on the coffee table at midnight. The money requests started small. $20 here, $50 there. I've got this sure thing tonight, he'd say. I'll pay you back double. He never paid anything back. Lisa made excuses. He's going through a hard time. Family helps family. What would my mother think? I stopped responding to the requests. Craig's resentment grew louder. Craig disguised his insults as jokes. Must be nice being a simple guy. No real pressure, just plugging in wires. Everyone would laugh. Lisa would tell me later not to be so sensitive. The thermos had rolled to the floor, forgotten. I stared at the folded clothes in the duffel bag. My hands had known before my mind admitted it. The bag proved what I'd been denying for weeks. I'd been ready to leave. Not shocking, clarifying. My body had been preparing while my conscious mind made excuses. While I told myself Lisa would eventually see how Craig was using her. While I convinced myself things would improve after the holidays. I'd packed an escape bag and hidden it in my own truck. Frank's voice came back. You can't fix people who don't want to be fixed, son. You can only decide what you'll tolerate. I'd decided. My hands had decided weeks ago. I started the engine. The cab filled with warm air and the familiar diesel rumble. Tommy's apartment had a spare room. He'd offered it 6 months ago, standing in his supply shop while I picked up wire. You ever need a place, he'd said. The offer stands. I shifted into reverse, checked the mirror. Through Janet's front window, I could see shapes moving. Probably Lisa explaining. Probably Craig defending himself. Probably the family choosing sides. I wasn't part of that anymore. I backed out of the driveway, shifted into drive, and headed toward Division Avenue. The duffel bag sat on the passenger seat next to Frank's tool belt. Everything I needed. I pulled into Tommy's garage 3 weeks after Craig moved in. The black Knight pinball machine sat against the far wall, circuit boards exposed like a patient on an operating table. Lisa had called it childish when I mentioned buying it. That was year 2 of our marriage. I stopped mentioning the machines after that. Tommy looked up from his workbench. "How's the house guest situation?" "He's settling in." Tommy nodded and went back to his wire strippers. He knew when to leave things alone. I spent 2 hours replacing corroded contacts on the flipper mechanisms. Clean the contact points. Test the voltage. Adjust the gap to exactly 3 millimeters. No guessing, no compromises. Either it worked or it didn't. My phone buzzed against the workbench. Craig. Lisa's text. "Craig needs 40 for groceries. Can you Venmo him?" I'd given Craig $40 last Tuesday. And 60 the week before that. The phone buzzed again. I adjusted the flipper gap to 3 millimeters. The phone buzzed a third time. I tested the voltage. By October, Craig started with the jokes. I was replacing a breaker panel at the Westman office when he walked past with 2 sales guys. "Hi, must be nice being a simple guy," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. No real pressure. Just plug in some wires and call it a day. The sales guys laughed. I finished labeling the circuits and packed my tools. That night at dinner, I mentioned it to Lisa. She waved her fork. "He's just teasing. Don't be so sensitive." I looked at my plate. Chicken breast, steamed vegetables, rice. The same meal we'd eaten every Tuesday for 3 years because Lisa's color-coded calendar said Tuesday was chicken night. He wasn't teasing. "Ben," she set down her fork. "He's going through a hard time. You know how much the eviction hurt his confidence. He needs to feel like he can still joke around." I cut my chicken into precise squares, 4 bites per piece. Chewed 20 times. Swallowed. The calendar hung on the kitchen wall behind her. Every family member had a color. Craig's entries had multiplied. Doctor's appointment. Job interview. Lunch with Mom. The blue squares representing our marriage had disappeared. Month 5, I came home early from a service call. Craig sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. "What are you doing?" He didn't look up. "Just checking my email." My phone died. I walked over. The laptop was angled toward him, but I could see the reflection in the window behind him. Bank account login screen. Our joint bank account. Transaction history. A $600 charge to DraftKings dated yesterday. "You used our account for sports betting?" He closed the laptop. "It's a sure thing. Pistons are giving 6.5 points. I'll pay it back tomorrow." I walked around the table, closed the laptop. The metal was warm from his hands. I carried it to my truck. "You went through my files to access our bank account." Lisa gave me the password last week. Said I could use it if I needed something. That night, Lisa cried when I confronted her. What was I supposed to do? He needed to check his unemployment claim. Mom would be so disappointed if she knew you were making Craig feel unwelcome in our home. He charged $600 to our account. He'll pay it back. When? She grabbed a tissue. Why are you being like this? Family helps family. I slept in the guest room that night. The wall between us glowed blue-white. DraftKings notification sounds. 3 in the morning. Then 4. Then 5. Christmas week. I needed my truck for a commercial job in Cascade. The keys weren't on the hook. I found Craig in the driveway, climbing out of the driver's seat. The gas gauge showed empty. A fresh dent creased the passenger door. I borrowed it for a quick errand, he said. Hope that's cool. I walked around to inspect the damage. The dent creased the passenger door, a deep gouge running along the lower panel. $400 to fix. Maybe 5. The metal was still warm from wherever he'd hit. What happened here? Parking lot thing, tight space, barely noticeable. Did you get the other driver's insurance? He laughed. It's like a tiny dent, man. Don't make a federal case out of it. I pulled out my phone. 3 photos from different angles. Documentation. Lisa came out in her robe. What's going on? Craig took my truck without asking. Brought it back empty with a dent in the door. She looked at the damage. Looked at Craig. Looked at me. It's just a work truck, Ben. He said he's sorry. Craig was checking his betting apps. Not sorry. Not offering to pay. Just scrolling through point spreads. He needs to pay for the repair. He doesn't have that kind of money right now. Pew, you know that. I stood there holding my phone with photos of the damage. My wife in her robe. Her brother checking his betting apps. My truck with an empty tank and a dent I'd have to pay to fix myself. Right, I said. I filled the tank at the Shell station on Division. Drove to the job site. Spent 8 hours running conduit through a mechanical room. That night, I stopped at Tommy's garage. Worked on the Black Knight until my hands stopped shaking. The flipper mechanisms needed adjustment. 3 millimeters, perfect gap, clean contact. I stood near the buffet table at 3 p.m., watching Craig hold court about his betting system. 23 family members packed Janet's basement. Sectional sofas overflowing with cousins. I saw twice a year. The coffee urn had been refilled 3 times. Picked over appetizer platters lined the table behind me. Craig gestured with his phone, showing his cousins his betting app screen. See, you gotta understand point spreads in correlation with injury reports. Most people don't track the backup player's performance metrics. His younger cousin Derek leaned in. So you're saying you can predict outcomes? Not predict, calculate probability. Craig scrolled through his betting app. Lakers are giving 4.5 tonight, but their starting center has a knee issue that's not public yet. Inside information changes everything. I sipped coffee from a plastic cup. Cold. I'd been standing here 40 minutes. Craig had been performing the entire time. The statistics he quoted were accurate. The system he described was nonsense. He looked up, caught my eye. Hey Ben, can I borrow 200? Got a sure thing tonight? The basement conversations didn't stop, but the volume dropped. People near us turned slightly, attention shifting. I don't think that's a good idea, Craig. His face reddened. The phone screen reflected blue light across his features. You don't think it's a good idea. You think you're better than me? I set my cup down on the buffet table. You're a goddamn electrician who married up for money. His voice filled the basement now. All conversations stopped. My sister took pity on you. You're a washed-up loser who got lucky, and everyone in this family knows it. My hand found the railing. I turned toward the stairs. Even your dead daddy would be ashamed of the coward you turned out to be. Frank's Timex pressed against my wrist. The basement had gone completely silent. No coffee cups moving. No whispered conversations. 23 people watching. Lisa stood abruptly from the sectional. Her face was flushed. Her green eyes caught the fluorescent light. She looked at me, then at the room, then back at me. Ben, apologize to Craig right now, in front of everyone, or I want a divorce. Janet's hand covered her mouth. I'm serious. Lisa's voice shook slightly. I'm done watching you disrespect my family. I looked at her for a long moment. Her designer jeans, cashmere sweater, highlighted hair styled for the family gathering. The color-coded calendar she maintained with such precision. The 6 months of Craig's mess spreading through our home while she made excuses. The duffel bag in my truck. The business account she'd never asked about. The 107 clients she thought were weekend hobbies. You know what? I released the railing. Heard. I accept. Her face drained of color. The divorce, I mean. I'll have my attorney contact yours by end of week. I climbed 3 steps before stopping, turned back to face the room. 23 faces staring. Craig's mouth open. Lisa frozen in place. Happy New Year, everyone. My work boots made the basement stairs creak. Behind me, someone gasped. Janet said Lisa's name. Craig started to say something, but stopped. I walked through the kitchen, past the formal dining room with its table set for 16. The front door closed quietly behind me. My truck sat in the driveway under the street lamp. The engine turned over on the first try. Warm air filled the cab. Through Janet's front window, I could see shapes moving in the living room. Perch. Lisa's silhouette. Janet's hand on her shoulder. The basement door opening, family members emerging. I shifted into reverse. The duffel bag sat on the passenger seat. Everything I needed. I backed out of the driveway, shifted into drive, and headed toward Division Avenue. The dashboard clock showed 3:47 p.m. In my rearview mirror, Janet's house grew smaller. The porch light came on. Lisa stood in the doorway, backlit. I didn't slow down. I parked the truck outside Tommy's electrical supply shop at 8:47 p.m. The apartment entrance sat between the shop and a closed bakery, unmarked except for a brass number plate. Tommy opened the door before I knocked. Saw your headlights. Come on up. Exposed brick walls, industrial windows overlooking Division Avenue, furniture that looked like estate sale finds but well maintained. The spare room held a bed, dresser, and lamp. Nothing else. Stay as long as you need, brother. Tommy gestured toward the room. Bathrooms down the hall. Coffee makers in the kitchen. Help yourself to whatever. I set the duffel bag on the bed. You eat yet? Tommy asked. Not hungry. He nodded and left me alone. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked Frank's Timex. 8:58 p.m. 3 hours since Janet's basement. 3 hours since the ultimatum. The next morning, I called Sarah Chen from the truck. She'd handled a contract dispute for me 4 years ago when a commercial client tried to stiff me on a panel upgrade. Ben Archer, it's been a while. I need a divorce attorney. She didn't ask why. Tell me what happened. I explained the New Year's gathering. Craig's insults. Lisa's public ultimatum. My acceptance. You agreed to the divorce in front of witnesses, 23 of them. Public acceptance of terms eliminates abandonment claims. Michigan courts recognize mutual agreement witnessed by third parties. Papers rustled on her end. I'll need financial documents, bank statements, tax returns, property deeds, everything that might be considered marital assets. I'll bring them this afternoon. After the call, I drove to Tommy's shop. He was restocking wire spools when I walked in. Need to get into the storage area. He tossed me the keys. Third aisle, back wall. Same place they've always been. The filing boxes sat on the bottom shelf where I'd stored them 8 years ago. Fireproof containers, labeled by year. I pulled out 2003 through 2023 and loaded them into the truck bed. Sarah's office occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse on Wealthy Street. She cleared her desk when I carried in the boxes. This is 20 years of business records, I said. Invoices, contracts, tax returns, client lists, payment histories, expense reports. Everything organized by year. She opened the 2003 box first. Pulled out the business license application dated April 14, 2003. You started this business 9 years before you got married. Correct. She reviewed the invoices, scanned the tax returns, checked the bank statements from the separate account I'd opened that same month. Your business generated how much last year? $180,000. Give or take. And you've been depositing this where? Separate business account. Different bank than the joint account Lisa and I used. Statements go to Tommy's address. Sarah looked up. She didn't know about this? She knew I did electrical work on weekends. Called them projects. I never said they were just hobbies. She went back to the documents. Spent 40 minutes reviewing invoices, cross-referencing tax returns, checking account statements. She opened the joint account statements I'd brought, reviewed the house equity paperwork, scanned the shared savings documentation. Finally, she set down her reading glasses. The business predates the marriage by 9 years. The separate account is legally protected. Michigan law considers premarital assets and income from those assets as individual property. She's entitled to half the joint marital assets, house equity, joint savings, but your business, your separate account, your tools, your truck, all of it stays with you. I looked at the filing boxes. 20 years of methodical record-keeping. Every invoice numbered. Every payment tracked. Every tax return filed on time. How much is in the separate account? $67,000 as of last week. Sarah made a note. We'll need to document that the deposits match your business income. Show the clear separation from marital funds. But based on these records, you're in good shape. 2 days later, my phone started ringing at 7:18 a.m. Lisa's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 722, then 7031, then 745. By noon, 17 missed calls. 3 voicemails. The first 2 asked me to call back. The third threatened to freeze me out of the house. I was replacing a 200-amp circuit breaker at a client's house in Cascade when she finally caught me. New panel, copper bus bars, proper torque on every connection. I stepped outside to take the call. You've been hiding money from me for 10 years. Her voice was raw, not angry yet, still in shock. I've been maintaining the business I started before we met. You never told me about a separate account. You never asked about my finances. You assumed I needed your family's job. Silence on her end. Traffic sounds from Division Avenue filtered through my phone. How much? Her voice had gone quiet. Enough to be fine. Ben, we need to talk about this. You can't just walk away from 12 years of marriage over one argument. I watched a red-tailed hawk circle above the subdivision. Clear sky, temperature dropping, good weather for outdoor work. You offered divorce. I accepted. That's not walking away. That's agreement. The business license is dated April 2003. We married in June 2012. The math is public record. I ended the call and went back inside to finish the breaker installation. Perfect gap on every contact. I parked outside Westman Construction at 3:47 p.m. Sarah Chen stepped out of her Acura, 2 spots over, briefcase in hand, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. You ready? She asked. I grabbed the document folder from the passenger seat. 20 years of business records condensed into 30 pages of tax returns, bank statements, and client contracts. Yeah, the conference room occupied the corner of the second floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the parking lot where my truck sat next to the dumpsters. Robert Westman sat at the head of the table in his usual spot. Salt and pepper hair, wearing khakis and a polo shirt with the company logo. Lisa sat to his right, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, makeup carefully applied but stress visible around her eyes. Janet perched beside her daughter, hands folded in her lap, wearing the same formal dress she'd worn to New Year's dinner. Robert stood when we entered. Ben, I wasn't expecting you to bring legal counsel to a family discussion. Sarah dropped her briefcase on the table with a deliberate thunk. Mrs. Westman requested this meeting. I'm here to ensure his interests are protected. We sat across from them. The heating system hummed. Coffee smell mixed with paper and winter air from the parking lot below. Robert cleared his throat. Ben, you're being unreasonable. Lisa made a mistake in the heat of the moment. Surely we can work this out like family. I set the folder on the table between us. She offered divorce. I accepted. That's agreement, not abandonment. Lisa leaned forward. You can't just throw away 12 years of marriage over one argument. You offered divorce as an ultimatum. I accepted the terms. Sarah's filing the paperwork this week. Robert's face reddened. Think about what you're doing. You'll lose your position here. How will you support yourself? I slid a single sheet across the table. Resignation letter, dated yesterday. Signed this morning. Already handled. My last day was yesterday. The paper trembled in Lisa's hands. She set it down, steadied her fingers on the table edge. You quit? I resigned. 2 weeks' notice seemed unnecessary given the circumstances. She tried to steady her voice. 2. You're making a huge mistake. You need this job. I opened the folder, pulled out the client list. 127 names, addresses, phone numbers. Service dates going back to 2003. I slid it across the table. I've never needed this job. I took it as a gesture of goodwill. Robert picked up the list, scanned the first page. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition. These are all active clients. Maintenance contracts, panel upgrades, commercial renovations. I've been managing them for 20 years. Janet's face had gone pale. 20 years? I pulled out the tax returns. 20 years of stapled packets. Every April from 2003 forward. The numbers told the story. My words never had. Sarah spoke for the first time. Mr. Archer started this business in April 2003, 9 years before the marriage. It generates $180,000 annually through independent contracts. Lisa's finger traced down the income column. Stopped at 2012, the year we married. Her mouth opened, closed. You've been making that much? The weekend projects you thought were hobbies. Those were my actual business. Robert flipped through the pages. Stopped on 2012, the year we married. His finger traced down the income column. You were already established when you met Lisa. 47 regular clients by then. The business kept growing. I slid the final documents across. Bank statements from the separate account. Every deposit matched to invoices in the client list. Every withdrawal document. 20 years of methodical record-keeping in black and white. Janet's voice came out quiet. You've been lying to us. I've been working. You assumed I was dependent. I never claimed to be. Lisa's voice came out thin. Why didn't? She stopped. Tried again. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her across the conference table. The carefully applied makeup, the designer clothes, the wedding ring she still wore. You called my pinball machines childish in year 2. I learned to keep parts of myself separate. That's not the same thing. You never asked about my weekend projects. You assumed they were hobbies, not my actual business. I didn't correct you because you'd already decided what they were. She covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. Mascara smeared when she looked up. Robert set down the tax returns. This changes things. Sarah closed her briefcase. Mr. Archer's business predates the marriage by 9 years. His separate account is legally protected. He's entitled to his tools, his truck, and his business assets. Mrs. Archer is entitled to half the joint marital property, the house equity, the joint savings. Nothing more. I stood, gathered the documents back into the folder. You knew the version I showed you. That was my mistake. Winter sun dropped below the roofline. Orange light filled the conference room. Through the windows, I could see my truck in the parking lot. Engine would turn over on the first try. Duffel bag behind the seat. Everything I needed. Sarah and I walked to the door. Behind us, Janet's voice. Proof. Lisa, quiet. What did you do? I didn't turn around. I sat in Tommy's apartment on a Tuesday morning when my phone buzzed with a message from Derek Westman, Craig's younger cousin. The one who'd been sitting closest to Craig during the betting system lecture at New Year's. That thing at New Year's. Craig was out of line. If you need electrical work referred, I know 3 property managers looking for reliable contractors. I typed back, thanks for reaching out. Happy to discuss their needs. By Thursday, 2 more cousins. By the following week, 5 family members. All apologizing. All offering work. Lisa called on day 3. I let it go to voicemail. The message came through broken. The joint account. Ben, what did Craig? A pause. What did he do to the joint account? I opened my banking app. Our joint checking showed $127.43. The savings we'd maintained for emergencies showed $0. I called Sarah Chen. Lisa just discovered the joint account situation. How bad? Checking nearly empty. Savings drained completely. Sarah made a note. Papers rustled on her end. Document everything. Screenshot the transactions. We'll need it for the settlement. That night, Lisa called 6 times. I answered on the 7th. $8,400. The words came out broken, spaces between each one. Craig spent $8,400 over 6 months. Groceries that weren't groceries. Gas for trips he never mentioned. DraftKings charges every single day. I noticed the $600 in October. Hurt? You knew? I told you about it. You said he'd pay it back. Silence on her end. Traffic sounds from her car. She was driving somewhere. I kicked him out, she said finally. Told him to pack his stuff and leave. He's at my mother's now. Protect? Okay, that's it? Just okay? I looked at the filing boxes still stacked in Tommy's spare room. 20 years of business records. Every invoice numbered. Every payment tracked. What do you want me to say? She ended the call. Month 2, Sarah called with updates on the settlement. Her attorney received the asset documentation. They're not contesting the business separation. She's entitled to half the house equity and half the joint savings, which is basically nothing now. Correct. The joint account depletion works in your favor. Demonstrates financial irresponsibility on her part. I was replacing a sub-panel at a client's house in Ada when Robert Westman called. I stepped outside to take it. We've lost 3 major contracts in 2 weeks, he said. No greeting. All of them asking for that quiet guy who used to work here. When I said you no longer worked here, they terminated. I'm sorry to hear that. Her, are you? Because Lisa's destroyed this company's reputation. All because she couldn't handle one argument with her brother. I watched a construction crew frame a house across the street. Steady work, methodical progress. No drama. I was available for 20 years, I said. You knew where to find me. I ended the call and went back inside to finish the panel installation. Month 3. I was working on the TRON machine in Tommy's garage. The display had a short I'd been tracking for weeks. Tommy found me testing voltage on the display connection. Clean reading, no fluctuation. The short was somewhere else in the circuit. Heard from Lisa's family today? He asked. Janet called yesterday, left a voicemail. What'd she say? I set down the multimeter. Said Lisa destroyed a good marriage over Craig's problems. Craig's back in her basement, checking those betting apps like nothing happened. What'd you say? Nothing. Deleted it. Tommy handed me a wire stripper. You doing okay? The voltage reading held steady. Clean contact. Perfect gap. Yeah, I said. I'm good. Feeling connected to my story? Like and comment. I read them all. I sat on the concrete floor testing voltage on the TRON machine's display board. 9 months since New Year's Day. The divorce papers sat in my truck's glove box, filed and stamped. I hadn't looked at them since the day they arrived. I kept the truck, the tools, the business, the separate account. Lisa bought out my half of the house equity with the settlement money, keeping the property for herself. I used the proceeds as down payment on a small ranch 2 blocks from Tommy's shop. 2 bedrooms, detached garage, quiet street. The client list reached 43 contracts. Annual income hit $195,000 last month. I hired Marcus, a 22-year-old apprentice with calloused hands and a notebook he filled with wire gauge specifications. Yesterday, he'd labeled a panel box before I asked, gaps measured to 3 millimeters. Frank would have approved. Frank's Timex pressed against my wrist, the weight familiar after 9 months of wearing it daily. A man who'll compromise his dignity for peace doesn't get either one. 3 weeks ago, Lisa sent a text. I made mistakes. We both did. Can we talk? I never responded. The TRON machine's bells rang when I flipped the test switch. Clean sound. Perfect timing. I'd been chasing a short in this circuit for 2 months. Finally fixed. Tommy walked in carrying 2 coffee mugs, steam rising. The TRON machine hummed, display lights cycling through their test sequence. How you doing? I set down the multimeter. Listened to the pinball bells. Watched the lights flash across the playfield. Quiet, peaceful. I took a sip of coffee. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was absence of contempt. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own life.